Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing in the Hachaim. We're in Parshat Shemot, Parak Aleph, Pasuk Tes. We're going to learn today a very interesting Hachaim. Before we begin, we want to thank the Dvar Torah Foundation for sponsoring the share, for promoting the share. We give them a bracha that they should continue in their avodas hakodesh and being marbe and mafretz, all the different shiurim that they do. They should continue to have siyata d'shmaya and atzlacha. The Hachaim is going to delve on a very interesting question. Paro wanted to enslave Klal Yisrael. Now, Paro had a job. How was he going to do that? How was he going to convince the Egyptian nation, relatively rational people, they were Rishoim, but to convince even Rishoim to enslave a nation, you need tremendous propaganda. So what was the propaganda that Paro was going to use to prey on the fear of the Mitzrayim? Hachaim says this is all hinted in the Psukim. And as we're going to learn, we're going to see the same themes have been repeated throughout history. Right? Unfortunately, the master, was the great Rasha Hitler Yamach Shemot v'Zichroi. He preyed on the fears of the German people. They were in an economic downturn and other things. There was communism on their borders. And we're going to see that the same sprach, the same language is used, repeated over and over. So when you see this language, when you see the people say this, you should be aware that this is their real intention, and it's all hinted in the pasuk. Now, the Hachaim is bothered by a few words in the pasuk. First of all, what's wrong if Klal Yisrael is growing? They're contributing to the economy. They're contributing to society. Does it make a difference? Okay, housing prices will go up a little bit, right? A little bit more. But in general, they're not a threat to anybody. And also, Paro uses, says the Hachaim, a very interesting word, hine, like wake up, people. These guys are a threat to us. What does that mean? Why are they a threat to us? Well, like the regular Egyptian says, what are they doing? We don't live necessarily neighbors to them, but we don't see major problems in their communities. So we're going to see how Paro preyed on the fears of the Mitzrayim to convince them that through use of propaganda, through use of chokhmah, right, to start to strategically deal with the unfortunate word Klal Yisrael, the Jewish problem, right? This was the same sprach that the Nazis Yamach Shemot said. So begins the Hachaim, Amru hine. Paro used the word hine. Now, the translation in English is behold. I don't know if that's the best way to translate the word hine. Hine means be aware, like here it is, like wake up. What does that mean? So the Hachaim explains that Derech Amr B'Pasuk Eichartem Oisi. Yaakov Avinu told Shimon and Levi, you've unsettled me, you've made me uncomfortable. Why? Because Yaakov told Shimon and Levi, the Canaanim know that there's a Messiah that Klal Yisrael will take over Eretz Yisrael. But right now they think that that's 500 years from now. So they don't have a problem with me. I don't have a problem with them. It's clear where we stand. I'm not a threat to them. They're not a threat to me. But now that you came and you wiped out Shechem in one go, the two of you, now all of a sudden, Yaakov says, you shook the barrel. It's not clear anymore where I stand, where they stand. And now they're nervous that maybe the prophecy is going to happen now. And now we're in danger. So based on that prophecy, on that language that Yaakov told Shimon and Levi why he was upset with them, Paro now used to convince the people of Mitzrayim that we see how fast Klal Yisrael is growing. We know how strong they are. We see Menashe and Ephraim was super strong, right? We saw what they did to Shechem. Now they're planning on fulfilling the prophecy to attack Canaan. And Canaan, said Paro, is our brother. And it's our job to protect our brother. So number one, right, we have to protect our friends. And the way to protect our friends is to enslave and to prevent Klal Yisrael from continuing to grow. Od Yirtza, we're going to skip like about 6 lines into the second explanation. Ba'amr hine am, al zeh haderech. He said, Ki am zeh meshuna mikol amam. This nation, as we know, is different than everybody else. Kemat, every anti-Semite uses this line. Haman used it, Hitler Yamach Shemot used it, today they use it. Ki all the other nations of the world, they integrate into society. They assimilate, right? The right in the United States, nations from all the world came in the early 19th century, in the early 20th century, and they assimilated, they integrated, right? The United States was called the melting pot of the world, but eventually people assimilated. Klal Yisrael does not assimilate, right? For the most part. Unfortunately, we know in America that that's not the case. But in general, up until 150 years ago, Klal Yisrael did not assimilate. The one exception was when they were in Bavel. That's a share for another time, between the first and second Beis Hamikdash. But in general, Klal Yisrael does not assimilate. What Paro was telling is, behold, the whole nation is exclusively Klal Yisrael. And therefore, they're very strong. They're stronger than regular nations because they are looking out for each other. And even though they're not as big as other nations, but since they all look out for each other in Chas v'Shalom and Etzara, they're actually much stronger. When you have unity, unity overcomes numbers. Because when you're together, a unit that's together, and they all look out for each other, they're much more effective than another unit that's 4 times the size. Why? Every general know that the best fighting units are the ones that have been fighting together for a long time. They're together, they're looking out for each other. Another explanation says, Hachaim, another thing that Paro used to pray on the fears of the Mitzrayim, that Klal Yisrael is multiplying at a rate that's not normal. Which means we start to see that they're having children 6 at a time. Most people don't have children 6 at a time. In addition, the more you give birth, the weaker the body gets. And not only the weaker the body gets, the weaker the child is, which means a child, the 8th child of a lady, according to the Tev of the world, should be weaker than the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd child. Right? We know that the best cow is the 3rd cow. The 1st cow is a little not as tough, the 2nd is a little better, the 3rd is the best, and then you start to get weaker and weaker. Why? Because the body, the Isha that's giving birth, her body is weaker and she's older, as opposed to Klal Yisrael is the opposite. The more they're giving birth, the stronger they're getting. So you see that there's a problem here. And even if they're going to be a lot, Rav v'atzum, right? Rav, there's a lot of them, v'atzum, and they're strong. And therefore, there's no way that we are going to be able to overcome them. You see that they're not your typical nation, and eventually they're going to come against us, and therefore we have to act b'chochma in order to prevent this from happening. Why? Because pen yirba, maybe they will become too numerous, and they will actually overtake us. Right? Either they will become too numerous and they will vote us out, or they'll become too numerous and too strong and they'll drive us out. Which was not true because Klal Yisrael had no interest in being in Mitzrayim. But this was something that the Egyptians used, and Paro used very cunningly, very smartly, strategically to prey on the fears of the Mitzrayim. Od Yirtza, another explanation. So now we're ready up to the 4th explanation. 4th Sprach, the 4th thing that Paro used to convince the Egyptians that Klal Yisrael was a threat to them. This is one of the most common things that all anti-Semites use. You know why Klal Yisrael is wealthy? Because they're using our land, they're using our roads, they're using our crop, they're using our universities. They owe us. It's all because of us that they're smart. It's all because of us. They owe us X, Y, and Z. So therefore we have the right to enslave them. Right? Right? Which means, why did Paro say this? Because Paro did not want the Egyptians to say, listen, how are we going to enslave them? I mean, it doesn't make sense. He says, no. They owe us. If not for us, right? If not for us doing this, right? Motherland, right? You all have to give to Mother Russia. That's what the communists always say, right? It's the land that gives you. It's not the persons work and determination and sweat together with him and the people that work with him. No. It's only because we built those roads and bridges, right? Without us, you do nothing. When you hear somebody says that, that's the first step to socialism and communism. How could you go ahead and take a nation and enslave them? So he had to explain to them, Hine am b'nei Yisrael. This nation, you know why they're a nation? It's because all of us. Because when there was famine, we sustained them. It wasn't you, it was really Yosef Atzadik. And B, they gave money, they paid taxes. Look, they came here with 70 people, and look how much they had. Now the people could make their conscience feel good. We're not enslaving you because we're bad people. We're enslaving you, we're forcing you to do things for us because you owe us. And if not for us, you'd be nothing. So Mamela Paro used that strategic persuasion to convince the Mitzrayim that they were actually doing something that they had the right and they were allowed to do. Or Yirtza, one more method that Paro used to convince the Egyptians, every country in the world, in order for them to raise their prestigious, what do you know what they do? They attack another nation. Right? Now, they're not going to attack a smaller nation. They'll attack a nation that obviously they can conquer. And people will say, look what this country did. Look, they attacked this country. They took over this people. They're chashuv people. Don't mess with them. Paro said, who's the most chashuv people in the world? Hine am b'nei Yisrael. Behold, the most chashuv is Klal Yisrael. You want that the nation of Egypt should be glorified. They are the ikar nation of the world. And if we can overcome them, if we can overtake them, we will be raised in our honor. But if Klal Yisrael ends up leaving, right, we're going to be nothing. Right? Every country that Klal Yisrael lived, as it says, they were the leaders of the world. Right? If you go out throughout history, wherever Klal Yisrael was, they were the greatest nation of the world. As soon as they left, that nation either disappeared or was relegated to third world countries or second world countries. They're not the same. You look throughout history, very clear. Right? Today, the greatest nation is the United States. It's the greatest concentration of the people. The last place was Russia. Russia, before the United States took over, was the greatest country in the world militarily, even though it was a little bit of a facade, but they had the greatest natural resources, right? Even Poland was a strong country, right? But Russia, where most of Klal Yisrael lived, they were the strongest. Nobody messed with them, right? If you go back, you had Spain, you had Portugal, right? You had Bavel, Persia, Rome, Greece, so on and so forth. So Paro told the Egyptians, right, that in order for us to raise our honor, right, it's important for us to make sure that Klal Yisrael stays where they are. Pen Yetzei Me'er, because eventually they will leave the country if not. And therefore we will be lowered. We will no longer be the leading country in the world. And if you want to be the leading country in the world, you have to ensure that Klal Yisrael does not leave. And the best way for them not to leave is to enslave them. And the more you think about the rationale or the reasonings that Paro gave to try to convince the Egyptians to enslave Klal Yisrael, the more you see this sprach used again and again, unfortunately, by all the different anti-Semites in the world. What their excuse? They're always looking for an excuse. Why are you attacking a Jew? What did a Jew do to you? Right? So they all make excuses. They owe us, we owe them, they're, it's kedaima. Right? And unfortunately, through this propaganda, many of the Rishonim of the world throughout history were able and to succeed in convincing rational people to do terrible things. However, at the end, as we know, Hakadosh Baruch Hu saved us, Kain Yeh B'Dareinu, and we should be Zaycha to the ultimate Geula.